Welcome everyone to Brickwork Ratings web conference. In this edition, we would talk about impact of COVID-19 on non-banking finance companies, that is NBFCs in the near term, medium term, and the long term. I am Satish Nair, your host for this conference. Today, we are indeed privileged to have eminent market participants of the country on this panel and a wide audience who have joined this conference from over 12 countries representing marquee foreign and domestic investors from asset management, insurance, pension, and sovereign funds. Let me take a moment to introduce my eminent panel on this conference. We have with us Mr. VP Nandakumar, Managing Director and CEO of Manappuram Finance, which is a pioneer and one of the largest gold finance companies in India and is rated BWR AA+. We also have Mr. Umesh Revankar, Managing Director and CEO of Shriram Transport Finance. Shriram Transport Finance is one of the largest vehicle finance companies in India and is rated AA+. In fact, Shriram Transport Finance has been financing heavy commercial vehicles, which has been the backbone during this lockdown and ensuring that our essential supplies to the country is restored. We also have Ashwini Huda, Deputy Managing Director, Indiabulls Housing Finance, again a pioneer in the concept of premium and affordable housing segment, and is one of the largest housing finance companies in India. Indiabulls Housing Finance is rated Brickwork Ratings AA+. We also have amongst with us Mr. P.K. Gupta, who is a former Managing Director of State Bank of India. And State Bank of India doesn't need any introduction. It is India's largest bank. We also have the privilege of having Gaurav Kumar, Founder and Managing Director of Vivriti Capital. Vivriti Capital is India's fastest growing platform, providing efficient access to financial services for financial institutions, corporates, SMEs, and individuals. Vivriti Capital is rated Brickwork Ratings A. We also have Vaidyanathan Ramaswamy, Director and Head of Financial Sector Ratings at Brickwork Ratings, which is India's third largest credit rating agency with over 14,000 rated issuers and more than 20% market share in the securitization transactions in FY20. Today's session will be moderated by Rajat Bahl, Chief Ratings Officer at Brickwork Ratings. Before we start the session, few announcements regarding the operations in this webinar. All attendees are on listen-only mode. If you need to ask a question, kindly type your questions in the question box on the control panel available on your screen. We would try to answer as much queries as we could. However, you are also welcome to reach out to us at investordesk@brickworkratings.com if you have any further questions. With this, I would like to hand over the session to Rajat.
As Satish mentioned, we have a great list of panelists here with us today. We've taken care in selecting the panelists to cover the entire spectrum of the NBFC segment in India. The aim was to give a good coverage of the views as they are emanating from the industry experts, and also to bring in our own view. So the way we would run this webinar today is we'll start off with Vaidyanathan giving a view of Brickwork Ratings as to how we are seeing the sector develop, the challenges, and what we see going forward, and how some of the measures that the regulators have taken have so far yielded results. So we'll start with that, and then we will move to our panelists to take their views. We will also be taking questions from the audience. So quite a few of you who have joined on the webinar, please feel free to type your questions. We will try to address as many of those as possible during this webinar. And where we cannot address it now because of time, we will also come back to you with answers for some of these questions. So without further delay, I will ask Mr. Vaidyanathan to take over and give his views on how we are seeing the sector develop for now. Vaidya?
I'll try and share the house view on the NBFC sector, and it will be a brief presentation on what we see is the impact of the COVID situation, what are the measures that's being taken by the regulator, and how has it panned out for the sector as a whole, and also what we see could be near-term outlook for the sector, both from a risk perspective and what measures could be taken. After which I'll hand over the dais to the panel discussion. So could we go to the first slide, please? Here we have shared our assessment of the impact on the key subsectors within the BFSI space, namely banks, NBFCs, HFCs, and microfinance institutions. For banks, we believe the impact of the COVID-19 will be medium to high. While many borrowers are availing of the loan moratorium, their ability to timely service debt post the moratorium period is a concern. We expect asset quality deterioration mainly in the MSME and retail loan segments for banks. Provisioning on account of loan moratorium will impact banking sector profitability. Brickwork, in its recent publication, had estimated that profitability hit could be around 35,000 crore or higher for the banking sector. With the slowdown in economic activities and expected increase in NPAs, banks' ability to write back provisions will be limited. Credit growth for banks is also expected to remain low in the near term. Moving on to NBFCs, liquidity pressures and refinance risks are increasing for many NBFCs, given that banks and mutual funds are shying away from lending to them. Alternate route of funding through securitization, which had witnessed a sharp rise in the past 18 months, has also dried up. While many of the NBFC borrowers have availed of the loan moratorium, we believe asset quality pressures are building for NBFCs, mainly in the business loans and low-income borrower segments. As disbursements come to a standstill and credit costs increase, profitability will also take a hit in the near term. Housing finance companies, on the other hand, are relatively better placed. Most of their home loans are to the salaried class, wherein the impact is expected to be low. However, loan against property and builder loan segments will feel the pain as construction activities have come to a halt and housing demand is expected to slow down. Collections in the next 2 to 3 months will be key in determining the extent of impact on the sector. Also, given the funding challenges, we believe HFCs will have to increasingly look towards the co-lending model with banks as a new normal. Finally, with regards to the microfinance sector, collections have taken a hit for most MFIs as almost all of their borrowers have availed of the loan moratorium. From a loan portfolio impact perspective, we believe the impact on the exposure to rural segments will be lower vis-a-vis that of semi-urban and urban segments. While most banks and NBFCs have given loan moratoriums to MFIs, the liquidity buffers with MFIs are very low, and many of them may not sustain beyond this quarter if collections do not resume from a liquidity standpoint. Moving on to slide 2, in the recent past, we have seen the regulators stepping in and taking series of measures to improve systemic liquidity. While it has substantially improved the liquidity available with banks, the benefit of the same is yet to flow to NBFCs. The 3-month moratorium announced by RBI has given a breather to both the lender and borrower community. However, the lender's ability to ensure the borrowers maintain credit discipline during and after the moratorium period remains to be seen. In case of NBFCs, banks have been very selective in approving loan moratorium to NBFCs. The relaxation in NPA recognition norms during the moratorium period will ensure that there is no immediate spike in NPAs for banks and NBFCs. However, RBI's stipulation of making additional provisioning on SMA accounts will impact profitability. RBI's announcement of TLTRO 1.0 did provide some ray of hope to NBFCs, and it was expected to ease the liquidity pressures. However, NBFCs did not get much funding from banks under this scheme. RBI then announced TLTRO 2.0, which is intended to mainly benefit mid and small NBFCs. Here again, there was limited participation by banks, which clearly reflects their reluctance to lend to non-banks. RBI had also announced a 50,000 crore special refinance window through DFIs like SIDBI, NHB, and NABARD. This, we believe, will provide liquidity support to non-banks and also safeguard the weaker ones from defaulting. However, refinance through this window is yet to commence. Can we now move to the third and final slide, please? So, in our view, the NBFC sector is racing against time, and players with strong liquidity and liquidity buffers and healthy capitalization are better placed to survive this pandemic. While systemic liquidity is high, liquidity in the hands of NBFCs and MFIs are limited. Lack of investor interest has also increased the refinance risk for these entities. Also, any delay in collections will only squeeze their financial position further and could increase the risk of default by weaker entities. Both RBI and government will have to take strong measures to restore investor lender confidence in the sector. We believe structures like the partial guarantee by the government can be reintroduced to enhance funding availability to the NBFC sector. This had worked very well in the past when it was introduced. RBI could also look at opening a special liquidity window for NBFCs for a temporary period. Asset quality pressures are bound to increase mainly in the MSME and unsecured loan segments once the moratorium ends. While retail mortgage and rural finance players are better placed for now. Resumption in collection post moratorium and collection efficiency of NBFCs will be a key monitorable. If the moratorium is extended beyond May because of the pandemic, it only adds more pressure on lenders from a recovery perspective. On the profitability front, high funding and credit costs will impact profitability in the near term. Players with a high proportion of digitized platform for collections may, however, have some savings on operating costs. With the slowdown in fund-based activities, non-banks will increasingly look at tapping fee-based activities to improve profitability. Finally, on the growth front, balance sheet growth is expected to be muted for most players this financial year. NBFCs will have to redefine their business models to survive the impact of the pandemic. Focus will move to conserving capital and increasingly partnering with banks for co-lending, and also look for fee-based business opportunities like third-party product distribution, etc. With this, I come to the end of my presentation, and back to you, Rajat. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaidya, for the brickwork views on what's happening around. We've started getting a lot of questions, and as you can imagine, most of them are related to either TLTRO and what's happening there, or today's situation on the mutual funds and what the impact of that is going to be. We'll come to those questions, and I'll get each of you your views on it. But before we get down to those, we can start off with the basic model itself and the questions related to that before moving to the liability side questions. So maybe I can start with Umesh, if given that CVs play a very large portion of the portfolio of the NBFCs, and we have seen many swings in the CV portfolios of CV financiers as well as banks over the years. And we've still been sort of coming out of that situation, and the entire CV industry itself sort of depends on what happens in the economy. But it's more complicated than, obviously, the economy is not doing well, so the CV segment will not do well. There are multiple elements of urban, rural, MHCV, LCV, used, new, and so on. So if you could throw some light on how each of these sort of sub-segments of the sector are playing out, and where you are seeing things relatively better and where the stress is more, and how do you think this will pan out over the next few quarters?
Thanks. Thanks for inviting to be a panel member here. See, one of the CV industry in India is highly fragmented, and the ownership is largely with the small operators. When I say small operators, many of them are owner operator. The structure of industry is such that large number of people are being part of this logistic or supply chain system, and here you have a lot of various products getting moved. One of the major product that gets moved is the day-to-day essentials. When I say essentials, it can be food grains, it could be FMCGs, it can be vegetable or day-to-day requirement, milk, everything. So now most of these essentials, they move on LCVs or used vehicle. Because depending upon the distances, India has 6 lakhs villages, and all these villages are getting connected by this kind of transportation, and it gets value by moving the each of these produce, what is produced in each of these villages, get value by moving. So these businesses are likely to remain strong even when the lockdown was announced. It was such a surprise that it has been announced within few hours. The system got into some kind of a jam because of that, and they could not really differentiate between what is essential, what is not essential, which vehicle to be allowed to go, which a vehicle not to be allowed to go, because when you lock it inter-district, it becomes a problem. Then you have a construction related activities which moves cement, steel, and building material. And that part of the business, I feel, is come to a total stop because construction activities are stopped and the laborers have moved out, and none of the activity relating to that is now under construction or under work. So now it is nearly a month, and it may take a while for that activity to get started. Then there is a mining related activity. Even there could be some delay in starting. Now, how much delay and what could happen to that? I feel if it is delayed beyond July, then there could be a longer vacuum or stop. So if it starts by mid-May, then some activity will be there till July, then probably it may halt temporarily. But that is something an annual event. So I feel that is the one area which may be employing around 10% of the total vehicle that can get stopped for long. Then rest of the vehicles are in supply chain. That means supplying raw materials or taking out the finished goods or moving between interstates and moving various goods that is required to add value. So if you split it, the smaller vehicles, the essential goods movement could be around 50 to 60% of the vehicle, and including both new and used put together. And predominantly used vehicles are getting used for smaller distance transportation. And maybe another 10% would be construction, and balance around 30% will be for interstate goods, which I feel will resume by May 15. So I feel the normalcy should come by June for most of the activity, and till then it could be earn and pay, that kind of a situation. So what I feel is, as far as the goods transportation is concerned, there would be a V-shaped recovery very quick because that is a part of a necessity. The only thing that is going to suffer is new vehicle sales. I feel the new vehicle sales, because of shifting from BS4 to BS6, the prices have gone up by 15% on an average. So smaller vehicle price has gone up by 20 plus percentage, and the heavy vehicles have gone up by 10 to 12 percentage. And the new vehicle sales will become a much bigger challenge. And I don't think new vehicle demand will come before December. So the used vehicle will play a major role in transportation, and also will have some premium because the new vehicles are not getting added. Because once you add a new vehicle into the system, then the resale value gets dropped. So I feel the new vehicle, the manufacturers of new vehicle would have to wait for longest time to sell their vehicle in the transportation industry. As far as the passenger vehicle is concerned, I feel the pain will be there for at least 3 months before next tourism season starts, tourism or traveling activity. That all will get postponed. I think maybe by September, the passenger activity will get started in a large scale. Till then, the urban transportation may get revival fast. So the local taxis and the local transportation that may get revived moment the lockdown is over. But the rest of the transportation may take a while. And when I say the rest of transportation related to tourism and travel, that kind of a transportation will take a little longer time. So that is my view on the overall vehicle industry.
Great, sir. Thank you. So I'll come back to you on specific points on that later, but first let me take views on the other sectors also. Maybe I'll move to Sir Nandakumar, given that, sir, your connection is a bit weak. We keep losing you in between. So now that it is active right now, I'll take you on first. So you have a much more diversified portfolio, but a large percentage of your portfolio is of borrowers of the slightly underprivileged section of the society. So how are you seeing things pan out there? There are obviously two parts of your portfolio: one secured and one which is low security or no security. So how are you seeing things different in this class?
Major part of our portfolio is gold loan. Gold loan is mostly trust is in the rural area, the rural economy. As you mentioned, the presentation, the rural economy is better compared to the economy now in this scenario. I agree with that. And the gold price is increasing. The gold price is also increasing because of the rupee depreciation. The domestic market is increasing. So, cooperative branch just now, what we see is redemptions. The releases are high compared to new pledges. So maybe because many of these customers are releasing their jewelry because they want to sell the jewelry, and they are selling it in the scrap market. So in gold loan, things are comparing to other sectors, it is better. In our subsidiary microfinance, the collections, because the moratorium is there, self-regulatory organizations than MFIN has asked its members to give moratorium, but we are also given moratorium. But many of the customers are willingly coming forward to remit, and we have provided online payment solutions. And the collections are maybe to the extent of some 10-15% now from the microfinance sector. They are voluntarily paying it. And affordable housing, we are up to 10 lakhs, mostly affordable housing, self-constructed properties. There the collections are seen better. The collections are over 40%. This is a scenario. So one thing what we have seen is given various digital payment options, collections are coming particularly from the rural economy. From the urban economy, urban markets, the collections are not that encouraging compared to rural markets.
Now that was interesting. So as you said, gold loan doing well given the liquid security, microfinance on the opposite extreme with only 10-15% collection, especially in the urban areas, and the other portfolios are somewhere in between, the affordable housing and the SME lending. So Gaurav, let me bring you in at this point. You also have a good amount of clientele in this sector, the SME lending as well as microfinance sector. You work at both. You are also a lender, but also you help them get funds from other lenders. So how are you seeing things, and where especially is the stress higher or where it is lower? If you can throw some light on that.
Our own experience of looking at, especially first I will briefly talk about the microfinance sector, because this has been in news for the last 2 weeks. Given that the lockdown has impacted the sector more than others, our own experience of being in the sector is now more than a decade old. I think the sector has gone through multiple points of stress. And this sector has, to our mind, out of the 8 sectors we are in, the financial services, has always emerged out of the crisis far more stronger. I think there are a lot of learnings from the past which microfinance companies are kind of taking forward during this crisis. Also, I think what is also remarkable, Rajat, here is that the sector, to our mind, has the strongest, I would say, SRO, self-regulatory organization in form of MFIN. And MFIN has been extremely proactive through and through, and especially during this crisis, guiding how partners need to operate. This sector also has, given the operating model, also enjoys a fairly high degree of trust with the borrower. So to the participants, I think I can at least assure our own historical experience, right? Even during the peak crisis and even demonetization, we have seen 90-day numbers at around 2.5 to 2.75, right? And although the peak 90-day number even in the past had reached 30-odd%. But overall, cumulatively, that's the kind of number which the sector has kind of demonstrated through and through. 2-3, I would say, data points and aspect of what we are seeing. As Mr. Nandakumar also mentioned, although MFIN has also encouraged and microfinance companies on their own have come out and given moratorium to their customers, but when they have contacted customers, almost 60% of customers have actually responded in affirmative that they have cash, and as and when the microfinance company becomes functional, they will be able to pay, right? And I think this is overwhelmingly coming from the rural markets. Also, given the underlying customer profile, they are largely drawing their income from either agriculture or agri-allied. Plus, they are also, involved in micro enterprises which earn their own revenues on a daily basis. So, to our mind, at this stage, the collection efficiencies have been low at around 10-15%. But our own experience going forward is post-lockdown. Again, MFIs are taking a very calibrated approach, but our own experience in the past has been that you start seeing collection efficiencies bouncing at around 60 to 70% within the first 3 months and around almost 95% and above over a 6-month period. I think some of the key points of engagement and what this sector will have to watch out for is because even post-lockdown, our own sense is that this COVID situation is not going to go away in a hurry. There might be phases of multiple measures which the government might have to take, depending on how the classification between red and green zones work. And this is one sector which still largely operates in cash. So I think the microfinance companies will have to focus and find a protocol in terms of engaging with customers, some measures in terms of innovation around collection, center meeting, moving customers gradually towards digital. I think those are, I think to our mind, some of the measures which very proactively microfinance companies are going to take. If you look at I would say 3.5-4 years back during demonetization, this was a sector which was the worst impacted.
Good to hear at least that there is resilience in this sector, and if things start normalizing in the COVID situation, at least they will be able to bounce back sooner than some of the others can. So that's a positive note. So let me move to Ashwini. Ashwini, from one end of the spectrum, the microfinance, let's move to your segment, which is considered to be on the top of the line for the NBFCs, which is the mortgage finance. And so you are in both affordable housing as well as the more salaried upper end home loans. So this spectrum, how are you seeing within these two spectrum, how things are looking like? And also then, given that you are also in the SME space, which is the loan against property and the developer finance. So if you can cover these segments as to how you are seeing things pan out.
Clearly, housing finance companies are not right now sweating because of the nature of the product. 70% of the loans are to salaried segment, 30% of the loans are to self-employed segment. While we are in affordable segment, but our affordable ticket size starts from loan of 1.5 to 2 million rupees. So we are not in the low ticket really. Our experience so far has been good. We've received almost 95% of collection in month of April. Our banking typically happens on 5th April. So it was early in the moratorium period. My sense is all the banking is through standing instructions, and home loan product should behave well, especially for the salaried. The collection in that segment should remain high. There is a certain proportion of borrowers who come back to us. There is slight misinformation where people think there is waiver of EMIs and not really moratorium on EMIs. So people have been asking for refund, whichever have been paid. Apart from the operational issues, after counseling, most of the people do not take moratorium. So our sense is for the home loan segment, moratorium would not be asked. The second segment that we are present is in the SME segment, which is loan against property, what we call loan against homes. SMEs are directly hit by the whole lockdown. where most of the businesses have stopped generating cash flows. In that background, certain percentage of these borrowers would want moratorium. Even though they've paid April EMI, they would want refund, because the impact is never immediate. It is more what happens few months down the line. And in anticipation or to preserve liquidity, a lot of SMEs are requesting that though automatically debit has happened and they have paid because they are still liquid, they would want facility of moratorium. One key difference between a home loan and loan against property is the LTVs. Typically in home loan, on average, LTV is more like 70% on book, and maximum it goes to 80%. Whereas in loan against property, maximum is 60% and then on book is around 45%. There is a risk that property prices will go down by around 10 to 20% in different micro markets. So on average, 15% is what our expectation is. We don't expect this to be a permanent diminution in value of properties, because India is one of the only large market in entire world where property prices have not moved up in last 10 years because of high real interest rate. Across the global, in all other economies, we've seen property prices go up dramatically in last 10 years. So there is no scope for any big deterioration. But since property purchases will be limited and any seller will have to sell at lower price, we believe 15% is par for the course if one has to sell property next 18 months, 12 months.
Let's move on to the most important panelist today, where all the eyes are on. Everybody is interested in knowing what the banks are doing and will the NBFCs continue to get support from banks. So, Mr. Gupta, you've heard the other panelists today, and most of them have said that in most of the asset classes, the issue is not very large. It is quite manageable. There are a couple of asset classes like MFIs and SME financing or developer financing, where the issue might be larger. But as one of the panelists mentioned, that the resilience of the MFI sector is also quite large to bounce back from such a situation. So in this scenario, everybody wants to understand, why are the banks still hesitant in extending more credit to NBFCs? And going forward, can we see more of this happening from the banks?
Thank you, Rajat. I think the MFIs do play a very, very important role. Last few years, we have seen that the most of the credit growth in the country has happened because of the NBFCs who have been lending quite aggressively. But what has happened now is that since this problem started, the collection efficiency of NBFCs has come down. Something like this happened in the past also at the time of demonetization, but they managed to bounce back quite well actually. And we do hope that if this doesn't last for a very long time, so they will be able to get back to their collection efficiency, which we have seen upwards of 95%. But I understand that now because of restrictions on movement of people, they have not been able to collect actually. So while this is one issue which probably can get sorted out, hopefully the people to whom they have lent to, their incomes are not impacted much actually. And as they bounce back, NBFCs will be able to collect. But I think the bigger issue is on the sourcing of NBFCs actually. From where do they source funds? They have been having this issue for almost 1.5 years since the IL&FS crisis broke, and subsequently the DHFL issue also came in actually. For the last about 1.5 years, as it is, NBFCs have been finding it difficult to raise funds from the market. So they used to have other sources of funding. They used to get money from the bond market. They had some other lenders, and they used to raise some of them at least from the public also. But I think those sources of funds have now totally dried up as far as NBFCs are concerned. So their reliance on the bank finance seems to become even more. In fact, if you look at it, I think right now most of the NBFCs, MFIs are only looking at the banks to be able to raise funds. The issues for the banks are basically that the bank's own balance sheets are a little stressed at this point of time. You know that NBFCs, MFIs are facing stress actually. So the question is how much more exposure the banks can take actually. I think that is where the real issue is. Some steps have been taken in the past so that the banks don't take on so much of risk on account of lending to NBFCs and MFIs on their books. One was the partial credit guarantee, which the government had announced. even though the government did liberalize the terms of the PCG subsequently, but not much happened under that scheme actually. Maybe one of the reasons was that that guarantee was available only for a limited period of time, while the exposure to the NBFCs would be for the banks for a much longer period of time actually. I think there is a probably case for liberalizing the terms of the PCG, which the government has been offering. I think if that guarantee is available for the entire duration of the loans, I think the banks should be able to take on the portfolios from the NBFCs. The second important initiative which the RBI had taken was about co-origination. But for some reason, even that has not really taken off very well because of there are a lot of complications involved in terms of how this co-origination will get done. I think there were technology challenges. Most of the banks and the NBFCs have not really been able to sort out those issues.
Ashwini, let me come back to you on follow-up questions from what you spoke earlier. These are questions that have come from the audience. One of the questions that has come is, while, as you said earlier, the housing finance portfolio is less impacted, but what's happening on the affordable housing piece? How much impact is there right now? And if the lockdown continues further, or if further moratorium extensions are given, how will this portfolio get impacted?
On affordable housing segment, where and for us, affordable housing segment is, let's say, a ticket size of around 1.5 million to 3 million rupees. That segment is where entry level white collar workers, take a loan after being 2-3 years into the job. So those jobs apparently right now are okay. They are not sensing any big slashing of jobs in that segment, unless of course the pandemic persists for a few quarters, and then of course a lot of these jobs also come into question. We do not cater to blue collar worker or small, very small businesses. So which is where my sense is pain would be more small businesses, especially in home loans. We've always catered to slightly higher segment, and not in below 1.5 million. The performance of this affordable housing segment, my sense is, would be in line with the rest of the book. Right now the collections are around 98%. In worst case, they will dip to around 95-96%.
So, Vaidya, let me come to you now. We've been hearing the panelists talking about where the situation is not as bad and which products the situation is worsening. We've had, and we've heard Mr. Gupta also talking about the bank books and what's happening on the bank's balance sheets. What has been your experience on the rating side? How are the ratings looking? What is the credit ratio looking like? What is happening on the upgrades? What's happening on the downgrades? And what's your outlook going forward?
So if you look at Brickwork ratings, at least for the last 18 months to now close to 2 years, the situation has been a little difficult, specifically for the NBFCs. And from a rating perspective, we ourselves have been monitoring the situation and taking rating actions wherever it is necessary. So if you look at the credit ratio is near zero, because there's hardly been one-off upgrades. Most of it, wherever necessary, we have taken the rating actions downwards. So we continue to monitor the situation, and as and when we believe there needs to be a correction, we would take the appropriate rating action. So that is where we are at this point of time from a ratings perspective. We also understand the lockdown situation also brings a lot of uncertainty. So post the lockdown and the moratorium period is over, we will continue to engage with our clients and take necessary action.
Mr. Revankar, let me come back to you after your initial comments. I'll take a few other questions which have come from the audience also. One of the things is, do you think that vehicle segment on the whole, maybe even to a large extent two-wheelers and also four-wheelers, is something that would pick up because there is now fear of being in public transport and people want to maintain some social distancing? So is that a segment that could grow better?
There will be increased demand for two-wheeler in the rural market, because rural income is also seem to be little better. Say last this particular year, that Kharif crop has been good, Rabi crop has been good. So the two-wheeler sales did not really pick up, maybe because people are waiting for the BS6 or something. But I think here people may take some buying decision, and two-wheeler sales definitely will go up. Four-wheeler, I really doubt, because the prices have gone up, and disposable income or discretionary spending, both would be at a little challenging. So I think the four-wheeler sales may not really improve, is what I personally feel. If maybe some rural four-wheeler demand can go up, but I feel the passenger vehicle should do better, because if I go back with what China did, in China what they did is they allowed the passenger car or taxis to run with the one sheet between passenger and driver, and they said not more than two passenger, and they did not allow passenger private vehicle to ply on the road, so that these people will have good income. So I think if government thinks on this line, because to imagine all three-wheeler and four-wheeler without business and the government to feed them is going to be a big task. So I think that kind of a thinking can come, and maybe even the passenger transportation will definitely see some kind of a bright spot, especially three-wheeler and four-wheeler. But crowded trains people may avoid for some time. Bombay Metro or even any crowded buses, people will definitely avoid. So there will be gradual upscale in this kind of transportation. So maybe taxis should come back, bounce back faster. Auto and taxis should come back faster, is what I feel. Maybe it will take a month, but by June things should bounce back.
We should get ready for more traffic on the roads.
Sure.
In the coming time.
Is it?
One other concern that seems to be coming out is while there might be demand for commercial vehicles going forward, but the labor availability is going to be an issue, and trucks need not just drivers but helpers, cleaners. There is a labor that is required there. Do you see that as a challenge?
Right now, my understanding is that because of the public transport not being available, drivers are not able to come back, because everybody is willing to give better salary to driver now. That is maybe indirect advantage to the driver community, but they're not able to reach back to the place. It may be a temporary, maybe 15 days or 1 month. But going forward, a loading unloading activity will be more mechanized. I think there will be push for mechanization, containerization, everything will become more orderly, the way you see in the foreign country. When I say foreign country, it need not be Western country. Even in Japan, if you go, if the driver of a truck himself will be unloading few of the items, and unloading system will be so easy. It is just like a simple crate. He'll just dump it and go. So otherwise, there will be a crane to lift the containers. So I think there will be more mechanization. Investment on the mechanization will go up in the next couple of years, and the too much of dependent on loaders, that kind of a physical strength, that will come down, because there will be some reluctance definitely from the people who have gone to their native place to come back to the city. They may not feel comfortable. So you need to give some more comfort to them, and that cost will go up, and mechanization should be only alternative. So going forward, things will change, and in meanwhile there will be some adjustment to the business. So business should come back very fast, because once all production lines start, there will be a pent-up demand, and business will start faster. And along with that, innovation and some mechanization also will come in the way you load and deal with the cleaner or the driver. So I think most of the drivers will definitely be given accommodation. In the past, they never bothered where drivers slept, but most of the owners now will give them an accommodation, and definitely their life will be much better. Meanwhile, owner operator will have advantage, because owner operator, he parks
the vehicle in front of him and he himself drives, he will find, because 70% of the Indian vehicle population still owned by the owner operator. So owner operator segment will do well.
I'll move to you for questions that have been coming from the audience on the securitization that's been happening. And the CV financing industry has been quite active in securitization. Are you seeing any change there? Is that slowing down in this condition, or do you expect this to continue like it has done well in the past?
Securitization happens in a two way. One is priority sector target. Banks have to reach the priority sector target, and whatever their increased lending, 40% has to go to priority sector, and some portion of it they will buy pool, either agri pool or the transportation industry, that is individual small vehicle operators segment. They will buy. So that is a necessity. So to the extent that demand will remain, and there are other demand which is non-prioritized, where some of the institutions are keep buying this portfolio, and depending upon what are the lending opportunity, they feel that securitization is the best opportunity, because securitization is typically a shorter tenor, because there is a seasoned portfolio pool is there and shorter tenor, and they'll be more comfortable. So securitization as a demand for the NBFC should not go down. I think it will only go up in this kind of scenario. And large banks may not really find a comfort in doing direct lending, especially in the retail. And more public sector banks are becoming larger now because of it. They are merging. As you become large, you find it difficult to do a small ticket in large scale. So I think the securitization demand, my personal feeling is that it will not come down, and there will be increased demand going forward. And as the economy picks up, because yesterday I was talking to one of the rating agency, and they said that this year there will be weaker growth, maybe around under 2%. But next year, first quarter, the GDP growth can go to 7.6%, because that pent-up demand will definitely create such a kind of opportunity. So maybe next couple of quarters, there could be some slowdown, but again, it will catch up very fast.
In the past, there has always been reluctance of public sector banks to move to structured instruments. We've seen mutual funds in some cases and private banks in some cases take on these structured instruments, but public sector banks don't do that. Do you think under the current situation and scenario, they'll be more open to looking at it? If they're obviously feasible, as you said, you'll have to look at the structures. But
actually, I'm not sure actually at this point of time that the public sector banks particularly will be looking to do very exotic stuff actually. I think right now the plain vanilla probably would be the kind of structures they will be looking at actually. Very complicated structures, as you know that ultimately some of these structures at the later stage the whole legality issue comes into question also. Some of the mutual fund structures which were done by them, I think there are a whole lot of again questions around them also, whether they should have been done or should not have been done. But now considering that, what are the issues going around with the mutual funds, the kind of investments they have done also. As you all know is that, again, you are a rating agency, that what happens to the ratings also, the moment defaults start actually. Right. So I think just because of a higher rating, whether the banks will invest, I think there will be a whole lot of question marks on that also. So, but I do believe that, this partial credit guarantee which the government had announced earlier, so if again, they tweak that a little bit, I think that would be one structure where probably the banks could invest in definitely.
So interesting, an input to the NBFCs and arrangers who are looking at these structures. But as you said, the government partial credit guarantee scheme, if modified appropriately, is something that the banks will be willing to look at. There is also the partial credit guarantee that the government has, or the regulator has allowed, where banks can give up to 40% partial guarantee to any entity so that the rating can come up. I think a couple of such ratings were done, but again, it's not been subscribed by banks yet. Even though these are these are structures where I think even SBI has given one such partial guarantee of about 20% to one of the NBFCs, but the structure hasn't taken off. But you believe that if the partial guarantee is provided by the government of India, then such structures can take off?
I think there are two different type of guarantees we are talking of. One is which the government had announced. Okay, so I think which was valid for 2 years, and you had to pay a fee for that. Okay, so I think maybe by the time the government announced changes in that scheme itself, the demand itself from the NBFCs had come down, so not many structures could get done. I think there was a issue around the NBFCs not being in the SMA category in the last 1 year. So that was another one reason why many NBFCs could not take advantage of that. The second is that the credit guarantee, as per the RBI scheme, where the banks could actually offer credit enhancement actually, and then those structures could be done in the market. But in that particular scheme, the capital requirement for the banks which is offering the credit enhancement was quite substantial. So given the constraints on the capital, it probably did not make much sense for the banks to offer the credit enhancement. So that is the reason why that didn't really take off. So I think if liquidity is there in the market, if as a bank you need to really maintain full capital on the enhancement that you have provided, so you could very well take the risk onto your books itself actually also. It didn't make sense for the banks to provide for the capital and not use the liquidity for funding the same asset.
So in sum, it comes out that it has to be through the partial credit guarantee scheme. An important input to the government is that scheme needs to be modified, tweaked a little bit more so that can be effectively used.
I think time has now come, I think, where more cooperation between the banks and the NBFCs, where the banks don't take direct exposure onto the NBFCs, but on the underlying assets and make use of the NBFCs more efficient manners to originate and collect the loans. I think that probably would be the way forward that this issue can be taken care of. The other issue, of course, has been on the moratorium, whether moratorium should be extended to the NBFCs or not. I think there are two sets of views. One, of course, is that as the underlying loans which the NBFCs have originated are getting the moratorium, so they should also get the moratorium. The other view, of course, is that as a financial intermediary, they should ideally be looking to fund any disruption in their business model by raising fresh funds rather than looking for a moratorium. I mean, simply, for example, if a bank cannot really ask its depositors to, not pay the money on the due dates, actually. So banks will have to be looking to raise fresh funds. So I think that is one set of views. Hopefully, some clarification will get issued and this probably will get sorted out. But I think there are two sets of views on that, actually. I think the bigger issue for the banks basically is their own balance sheets are stressed. Their capital adequacy ratios are under a bit of an issue. So whether they do more by means of lending through NBFCs or if they have to do origination themselves, so what is more preferred way of doing it? I think that is essentially the issue. At some level, I think there is also a concern that any money lent to the NBFCs now may probably do not result in fresh lending. It may probably get used to repair the balance sheets of NBFCs. So I think that is again one concern which is there at some levels. So again, I think the RBI and the government probably will have to do a little more so that this issue gets addressed satisfactorily.
Great to hear that. So shift in business model is something that is an imperative now that will help NBFCs continue to access funds. Just a follow up on that, are you seeing a lot of people or are you expecting a lot of people coming for moratorium? And also on your moratorium, are you applying for moratoriums? Are you expecting moratoriums? How is that panning out?
The way it works is that salaried class by and large, I mean, we assume 90-95% of people will not seek moratorium for the loan against property and home loans to, again, SMEs. We expect a lot of people to come forward and ask for moratorium. And then developers, my sense is a large part of them will ask for moratorium. So the way we are seeing is that around 30-40% of our book definitely, lies in a segment where a part of those people will ask for moratorium. Just because people ask does not necessarily mean they need it. Everyone wants to conserve liquidity in these times because the horizon of exit of this pandemic is not known. So while people, let's say, can sustain 6-12 months, but they may not be able to sustain 18-24 months. So on those consideration, there may be some request, but we would incentivize these people rather than taking those moratoriums. Having said that, back to back, because we will be ending up offering this moratorium to a certain percentage of our customers. We are seeking moratorium from our banks, and our experience has been good so far. I mean, in month of April, we have not so far paid any of the banks. We got moratorium or rollover on all the facilities. It helps me conserve my liquidity while I carry enough liquidity to service next 12 months repayment. But again, I'm also very conscious of the fact that there is no clear sign as to when the pandemic will end. Also, there is the moratorium does not apply to my foreign currency borrowing, offshore borrowing, and even the bond market is slightly undecided right now as to how to give that moratorium. So keeping all those things in view, at least banks I've approached and we have been receiving so far.
You said you've asked for moratorium and you've been getting them. There is another view that's there in the market that given that there is a TLTRO facility that's available where banks can lend to NBFCs also, then should NBFCs be given the moratorium, and why not instead they use the TLTRO facility? So what's your view on that?
You can never go wrong if you're on the side of caution. Yes, I mean, if the logic is that do you need moratorium? I don't need. In fact, I had pre-funded all my March repayment to my lenders by 15th March itself, because I could see lockdown and payments which were more due between 27th March and 30th March were already paid by 15th March. So I always err on the side of caution. It is to conserve liquidity is something which is very prudent in this environment. Yes, TLTRO one will receive. We've already received two funding, yesterday. So we've already launched a 1,500 crore bond program, of which around 300 is subscribed yesterday itself. So the money will come through TLTRO, but I don't think so we can depend on that, because in case they are of size and consequence going forward, and we've seen the appetite right now among banks was low. So we really need to see the proof of the concept as to what kind of liquidity we can expect on an ongoing basis in a reasonable certainty matter. After that, if we believe, we don't want to hoard liquidity, because the money that I'm putting all my money in overnight funds, which is CBLO returns, which is around 3% that I'm getting. So borrowing money at 9% and keeping in 3% is only an insurance cost that I'm paying, and it is not out of volition or anything else. So I will not hold excessive liquidity. I'm not too sure how much funding in a normal course through RBI actions or through a bank's appetite or through the market, how much it can come my way. So I'm being extra cautious.
Okay. So Ashwani, the other question that's coming for you from the audience as well as which is there in everyone's mind is the funding from the capital market and the situation of the capital market. We've seen the mutual funds restraining their lending to NBFCs in the past few months. And with the latest situation with Franklin Templeton, do you see this challenge exacerbate further and mutual funds will become even more wary of investing and lending to NBFCs, and how will that pan out?
My perspective is that these are definitely exceptional times. Clearly, since there is no visibility on how the environment will pan out, non-banks, which were anyway reeling under limited access to the market, the papers have become illiquid. Our secondary markets, are not developed, unlike, US or other developed markets. So clearly, apart from, you know, 2 or 3 names in the entire non-bank space, no paper generally also finds enough liquidity. So it was bound to, you know, suffer in this extraordinary circumstance, and it's only fair to, you know, accept that these things happens once in 5, 7, 10 years time, and can't be the rule of the game. So my sense is once things stabilize, once there is back to normal, whenever it happens, whether it happens in 3 months or it happens in 9 months, SEBI has done its own bit. The disclosure norms for investment by these mutual funds are much better. We will continue to see appetite for non-banks which have retail book. The whole issue that crept up within the NBFC credit quality was that a part of wholesale book was getting funded through the NCD route from mutual funds and other market participant. And that money, you know, mutual fund money or the market money is not unlike banks, a very stable money. And in times stress time, wholesale asset become illiquid. So there was a natural ALM mismatch that got built into the market, and that has resulted in disruptions and slowdown within the NBFC segment. Going forward, NBFCs have learned that the only way to have a permanent access to capital market is ensuring that 90% or more of your asset is actually retail granular asset and not wholesale asset. Till such time you don't have a developed market, that is what the course most of the non-banks would take, is my sense. And as long as that is the case, and there are disclosures now that you need to disclose what kind of retail mix or a wholesale mix and everything is there, I think NBFCs will get back to the marketplace, you know, as and when things normalize.
Ashwini, one other question that has come from the audience, and what we heard Mr. Gupta speak earlier, was that the PCG scheme that was launched with partial guarantee from the government, didn't take off to the extent it was envisaged because of multiple problems. One of the key ones, as he said, was that the guarantee is available only up to a certain period of time, whereas the pool that is being bought will have a maturity which is much longer. So it didn't give as much comfort to the banks. So it didn't take off too much. But we saw you have done quite a bit under that scheme, direct assignments under the PCG scheme. Do you expect that this would continue to work going forward, or something needs to be changed in that scheme to make it more effective?
The reason that we were perhaps the largest issuer of mortgage loans under PCG scheme was because for last 7-8 years we've sold almost more than 50,000 crore of portfolios in home loan and loan against property LAP to various banks. Almost 20 odd banks regularly buy these pools. So we had a established credit history with these banks. They had bought our pools. They had seen how the NPLs was, you know, 10-20 basis point across cycles. So there was a lot of comfort around our portfolios. In fact, even before PCG, we could sell our portfolios in quantum. In last financial year, which is FY19, we could sell down without PCG also some 20,000 crore of book to raise cash and redeem all our commercial papers. So to set our ALM permanently better. So clearly, while PCG is more suited to a shorter duration and a riskier asset, which is, you know, the other loans like commercial vehicle or a two-wheeler, three-wheeler kind of loan, it was not very helpful for a mortgage player. One, our loans are longer tenor, and the guarantee was only for 2 years. And two, as we saw it, people were buying, banks were buying our pools any which ways, and by introduction of PCG, it only delayed our securitization program, and in fact increased our cost by 50 basis point of guarantee commission that we were supposed to pay to the government. So yes, PCG, the partial credit guarantee scheme would work in an environment where an asset class has become an issue as far as securitization is concerned, and as a result, that guarantee puts life back into the securitization program. At a time when people were buying mortgage pools without that support, I don't think so that was needed at that time. If you ask me, is it needed today? I think it will be more helpful today, because there is general averseness to buy into any asset class. There is more uncertainty. Retail credit in India is very resilient, but still people don't know how the pandemic will play out, and as a result there will be general, you can say, conservative behavior from buying banks, and a PCG will help in that sense.
Another question that has come from the audience for you is how are you treating the moratoriums that are being given by banks? How is that accounted for in the rating process? And what do you expect will happen after the moratorium ends?
Banks, wherever the moratoriums are given, we are ensuring that the client shares with us the both either verbally or the written confirmation from the banks, and there we will take any necessary action post the moratorium if we believe that the repayments are not timely. However, in case of NBFCs, what we are seeing is there is still some uncertainty whether all the NBFCs are getting the moratorium. So wherever there is an application for moratorium, we are confirming that they are getting the moratoriums from the banks. In case of the market instruments, capital market instruments, if the moratorium request has been sent to the investor before the due repayment date and that has been confirmed, that is what we will take into consideration.
So, Mr. Nandakumar, coming back to you, as you said, the gold finance product is working fine. There is no problem in that product, and given the liquidity also in that product, things are looking fine. With the way the gold prices are increasing now and expected to continue to increase, can we expect to see at least one product in the NBFC space that will continue to grow well in the current fiscal also?
Usually the customers borrow based on their need only. The reason is they pledge their jewelry, family jewelry. They are very keen to redeem at the earliest moment. There used to be a family pressure also. All these are family jewelry for the middle class and the lower middle class, who are our audience, customers. These family jewels are very important. So only at the time of extreme need or a short-term need, they come forward and pledge jewelry. So what we have seen when the gold price has gone up, the average LTV has come down. So even now, when our few branches are open, what we see, the redemptions are happening, not borrowing, but redemptions are much more than the borrowing. So even in a stress situation, they are very keen to redeem their jewelry which are pledged. So I don't think with the sharp increase in price of gold, there will be an unusual increase going to be in the business.
Mr. Nandakumar, coming back to you, I understand that the situation seems to have normalized a bit more in Kerala and branches have started opening for NBFCs. So how has that experience been? Are things coming back to normalcy faster than the other states?
Even in the hospitalized cases, discharges are happening. Very soon, in a couple of days, the total number of patients admitted to the hospital may come down below 100. This gives a lot of confidence for the administration to free many of these controls. So that is the situation in Kerala. And what our experience is, our branches are open. Many of our branches are open in Kerala, but the customers are more coming for redemption. There could be one reason. They can also sell this scrap in the market and get money even after settling our proceeds. That could be one reason. Another reason, maybe they were waiting for 2-3 weeks for redemption because there could be some family ceremonies, etc. So, other than that, also, whenever they have the money, it's their normal priority to redeem this jewelry which are pledged, because there are sentimental reasons also attached to it. So redemptions are seen more.
Also, now that you are much more diversified with a lot of other products also, how are you, and your funding requirements have also gone up. You've diversified your funding also, sources of funding. So how are you seeing things pan out on the liability side, given the challenge that the mutual fund sector is now facing, and the banks also becoming much more risk averse? So how much is that impact showing up on you?
We have not faced any liquidity challenge so far. Even during the last 1 year, we have not faced any liquidity challenge. CPs used to be rolled over. Even after this lockdown, also we have, so far we have got around 750 crores by way of rollover, and some new CPs are also coming. So maybe because investor or lender has his own comfort to be in the product, mainly gold loan, because of the product mix, many of our lenders are comfortable today. When the lender hear about the gold loan, particularly as our gold loan product is of a 3-month contract, the lenders are very keen about that and comfortable to lend.
Also been on securitization. We haven't been doing much of securitization in the past, but in the current scenario, do you think that's a product which the gold finance industry will start utilizing more? There seems to be some demand on that. So is that something that you're looking at?
No, the challenge here is it is not a structured loan. Repayment obligations are not structured in that sense. And the average life of the loan is around 50 days. Because of these challenges, we are not in a position to securitize. And some of the gold lenders have a product where they are offering this as a medium-term loan, and these repayments are made through installment. So we are not launched that product. So because of that, securitization is not possible as far as our product is concerned.
Maybe one final question from you. What would be your suggestions, recommendations to both the government and the regulators to ease whatever are the constraints that are being faced by the NBFC sector?
Major reason for as far as the lender is concerned is the credit concern. So as long as that credit concern is there, they will be very hesitant to lend. So government should come forward with a guarantee or something like that, credit loss guarantee, etc. So then only the lender will be ready to come forward to take the risk. This option of TLTRO so far has not been successful. So that challenge remains. So the government should come out with something, or there shall be a window to borrow directly from RBI. These are the options which should be explored by the market.
Thank you so much. So some interesting recommendations. So I hope they will also take note of these and work towards making it a possibility. One question still remains unsolved, which the other panelists are quite interested in knowing. RBI, as you said, has taken measures to infuse liquidity in the system, and a lot of that liquidity is also now available with banks. They've also tried to bring down the reverse repo rate so that banks don't park this money with RBI and lend. But from TLTRO 1 that happened, where a lot of money has come into the banks, the money went only to the AAA and the high AA rated players and public sector entities. And hence the need was felt to have a TLTRO 2 to ensure that the smaller NBFCs and even smaller corporates get this money. But TLTRO 2 hasn't taken off. Less than 50% of the first tranche of bidding that happened got subscribed. So what do you think needs to change for banks to accept this TLTRO and then lend to these smaller NBFCs? And if not the TLTRO route, what is the other route through which NBFCs, the mid and small size NBFCs, can get liquidity?
Right now, the issue is not the liquidity at all. The issue essentially is about how much risk that the banks can take onto their balance sheets. Particularly when you are aware of the fact that most of the NBFCs and MFIs are facing issues on collection. We know that some of their assets books are stressed. The banks are facing stress on their own lending also, actually. Okay, I think the question is how much of risk they can take, whether the risk can be taken by somebody else, whether this lending can happen through maybe some of the other agencies. I think 50,000 crore, which the RBI made available for lending through SIDBI and NHB, maybe that could be a better route. I think the issue is around the bank's balance sheets. I think that is where the whole issue is. And secondly, as I said earlier also, what are the other sources of funding for NBFCs? Can bank finance be the only source of funding as far as the NBFCs are concerned? I think there are big question mark about how much other funds the NBFCs can raise. So I think till you have clarity on some of these issues going forward, there would definitely be, some issues with the banks lending more and more to NBFCs. And I also know that for many of the banks, their existing exposures to the NBFCs is quite large. Okay, so the question is how much of more they can add to that existing exposure. I think that is where the issues are. The government, RBI, the banks probably all need to sit together and work out a solution for this.
There's a question that has come from the audience while we've been talking about NBFCs. Vaidya also brought out in his presentation, the banks themselves are taking a hit in their asset quality and profitability. Even with this 10% provisioning requirement that has come for the SMA accounts where moratoriums have been given, our estimate was that at least about 35,000 crore hit would be taken by banks on their profitability. So and if the moratoriums and lockdowns continue further, and there are already indications that it may not end on May 3rd, then how badly do you think banks can get hit? And what do the banks now have to do to ensure that their balance sheets remain healthy?
This brings back to the whole issue as to how much of additional risk that the banks can take on their balance sheets. See, the moratorium which was announced probably is not going to be enough actually. Longer moratorium would be required. Most of the existing loans will probably require restructuring, and not just restructuring, they would be quite deep restructuring that would be required. Fresh lending has to happen to the existing units itself to be able to restart their businesses also. Okay, some of even the interest which has been applied and not collected will have to be converted into some kind of a funded interest. See, for example, the interest deferment which the RBI allowed, that the 3 months interest can be deferred, but this will all require to be paid in the month of June. I'm not sure how many people will be able to pay 4 months interest in the month of June itself actually. So that will probably be required to be converted into some kind of a long-term liability which is repayable over maybe say 2 to 3 years. Similarly, of the existing working capital finance also, some of it will have to be converted into term loans. So a lot of deep restructuring will have to be required. As of now, what RBI has permitted is that MSME loans up to 25 crores, which were under stress as on 1st of January, can be restructured. So if somebody was not on stressed as on 1st January, cannot be restructured. Again, above 25 crore loans cannot be restructured. I think a little more relaxation in terms of restructuring of existing loans also will be required. So I think there is a lot of work which the banks will have to do. So NBFCs is one of the, I think, side issues. There are bigger challenges in front of the banks going forward, I suppose.
So Gaurav, let me come back to you. As some of the other panelists have been saying that they expect more to come out of in form of guarantees from the government for the banks to get comfort to start lending more to the NBFCs. Now, you have a lot of clients in your portfolio which are in the BBB, some in A category, and some even below the investment grade. How do you think that the banking sector will now get confidence and to start lending to these borrowers? And what, if any, in form of structures that you are thinking of which can be of use to them?
As you rightly said, the challenge has been largely credit risk rather than liquidity. And I think from the TLTRO proceeds, now that we know how much has been bid by each of these banks, the banks are taking a two-pronged strategy. One is in this environment, it is extremely difficult to onboard a new issuer. So it's difficult to evaluate a new issuer and get them into the system. So large focus is going to be on issuers who have been in the system and have already been taken exposure on. And then that leaves the question on what happens to even companies which are below AA. There is some allocation which is being made at a sectoral level. So that will definitely channelize capital into microfinance. So let me start with microfinance first, and then I'll also come to NBFCs, which are in the BBB category. In microfinance, we will see two legs. One is, just given that 10% of the overall proceeds have to go to microfinance, the larger ones should definitely see allocation. Microfinance companies which are in the AA- to A category should definitely see bank participation, given that microfinance also enjoys direct priority sector, and some of them have already benefited from that. Second, I think to our mind, as you rightly said, we are also looking at pooled bond issuance structure, which at least takes the rating category up by 2 to 3 notches. And wherever, if banks don't have comfort, then we are thinking about a funded pooled bond structure, where they don't have to even rely on the unfunded guarantee which might come in. We have, in fact, also made recommendations, and hopefully, I think the need of the hour is for the government sovereigns to step in. I think it would be truly remarkable if entities like NABARD and SIDBI in particular, who have seen this sector very closely, understand the sectoral risk very well, and have been supportive of this sector through and through, come in as guarantors into the program, right? So with them coming in, I think you will definitely see a 2 to 3 notch upgrade. And in fact, to share with you, I think even during the last 2 crises, a lot of credit enhanced loan products was what got liquidity back into the system. And given the nature of the TLTRO, I think we have been working on a pooled bond issuance very closely with the MFIN as well, and then their partners. On the NBFC side, I think the challenge is much larger. The BBB NBFCs, again, the pooled bond issuance is something which can be put together, but just given the kind of lack of allocation, and there you are already seeing some allocation being made to even A- rated entities below 500. I think it would be a bit of a challenge for the smaller NBFCs to get liquidity.
Some interesting products that are in the pipeline, which can possibly help the smaller and mid-sized NBFCs to get some funding. So Gaurav, let me come back to you. As Mr. Gupta says, public sector banks will be wary of investing in any of these structures, as he called them, exotic structures, and they would want to stick to plain vanilla lending. So where do you think would be the appetite for investors here? Who do you think would be the potential investors for such products?
I think Mr. Gupta is right. I think if you look at the historical experience of, if I look at the pooled loan issuance, right, and the partial guaranteed loan product which came out once ADB also started doing this program in India almost 7-8 years back, and now we have seen pooled loan issuances being done more than 3,000 odd crores, right, cumulatively. I think the main takers of these products have been largely private sector banks and NBFCs, the larger NBFCs. Our own reading is that private sector banks have already taken exposure through these products. They have had very good experience. None of the guarantees, even during stressful phase of demonetization plus post ILFS, no guarantee was called upon. And I think given the kind of comfort they have, the key for private sector banks, I think, should definitely accept this product, given that they have already done more than 3,000 odd crores. On the public sector bank side, as Mr. Gupta said, I think once you have the DFIs, the developmental financial institutions in form of NABARD and SIDBI coming in as guarantor, right? I think you will see a larger acceptance coming in even from public sector banks. SBI has already done such structures. Such structures are not new to public sector banks, but they have done these structures largely in the A category and a AA category, and where the guarantor was a sovereign, right? So I think these two combinations will play an important role for public sector banks to start getting more comfortable with these structures.
Interesting. So there is hope on some of these structures picking up and bringing some relief to the NBFCs. Gaurav, let me come to how you're seeing things from the foreign institutional investors. Are we still seeing interest from FPIs in investing in NBFCs in India? And especially now with India at least holding on in terms of the pandemic not performing as bad as some of the other markets, do you expect more funding to get allocated to the Indian overall companies in India and more specifically to NBFCs?
That's a great question. I think 2 points I would broadly like to share with you in my own discussion over the last month or so with foreign investors. First, on equity capital, because that to our mind is very important. I think this is the first situation which we are facing where both sides of the balance sheet have been impacted, and equity investors are going to wait for some time. Their current focus is to look at existing portfolio. A lot of measures have been taken to increase the runway where companies were largely loss making. More capital is going to be allocated, but only once they are very clear on what the overall revenue model as well as cost optimization looks like. So one, they are trying to limit support to existing portfolio companies. One interesting development, Rajat, I think, which we are seeing, and in fact we are working with some of the private equity funds, is that their LPs are extremely supportive of the current portfolio, and they are looking at putting in debt into these companies. Right now, there is going to be a lot of collaboration opportunity which will come up, where you will see a lot of AIFs, really trying to channelize some of these offshore debt into specific pools of companies, which will be focused on a particular private equity investor to support their underlying portfolio through debt. So equity investors are, thinking, very, very clearly that this is not a 3 month, 6 months issue. This is definitely a 12-month issue to say the least. So they are also thinking about how they can get support to existing companies even through debt by partnering with domestic AIFs and channelizing a lot of offshore capital to flow in. On equity, to be honest, I think our own take is it is going to take time. We don't see equity capital flowing in over the next 3 to 6 months. Diligence is going to be difficult. A lot of numbers and assumptions have to be relooked at. We don't know what the new normal is. Everybody's talking about the new normal post-COVID, but in many of these businesses, we don't know, including hospitality, travel, and many of the consumer-facing businesses. Typically on the debt side, I think encouraging signs. I think again the developmental financial institutions on the offshore side has been very encouraging. As we speak, some of them have already taken exposure even in April. So these guys have been very sectoral focused over the years. Their focus areas have been largely microfinance, SME finance, affordable housing finance, clean energy, etc. So some of them are definitely trying to come in and support some of these sectors, either through a bond issuance or through an ECB product, or also extending what we are calling as an SBLC from an offshore bank, which is helping the domestic bank to take exposure. So I think beyond public sector banks, I think we are definitely looking forward to the DFIs on the offshore side to come in the next 3 to 4 months.
As the other panelists have been saying, this now might become more of an imperative going forward in the current situation where liabilities becomes a challenge, liquidity is of prime importance. So do you think the CV industry will also look at co-origination as one of the important models?
There are challenges in co-origination. One, the large NBFC like us, which are deposit-taking NBFC, are kept out of co-origination. Okay, that's one. And the second challenge is most of the banks have over the period gone into a centralized model wherein all the credit decisions are taken by a centralized system. It will be system driven and a screen driven. So you are building a credit screen, and that will be uniform across all geographies and all, maybe even industry. And so a customized lending is virtually out now. There is no customized lending by any of the banks, because most of the banks are getting into that kind of a credit. So now imagine you have a bank screen and you are trying to fit in an NBFC customer. Now, why a customer goes to NBFC? He goes to NBFC because he is not fitting into banking screen. So how can you bring him through NBFC and fit in banking screen, that means you are doing some adjustment. I personally feel, if at all you believe that your credit screen need to be very strong, and you are diluting for the sake of a particular program, then it will get weakened. So it cannot be a scalable model. Then case by case, you need to fit in each of the cases. Now, how many 5 lakh or 10 lakh ticket size you keep on fitting into the screen and trying to test whether it will pass or not, or it will be highly time consuming. And that's one of the reason today it is not scaled up, because it is highly time consuming trying to fit in each of the business proposal. So I think that is an inherited problem. Otherwise, NBFC have to train their team and customer to fit into banking screen. It is not an ideal situation. So I feel the very niche small NBFC can locally build some kind of a scale and remain there without growing, remain with one or two bank. That is possible. Now, what is your drive to just to be partner of the bank and do some business within the screen? At that, your drive may not be really big. So I feel the best way for bank is to look at the business model of the NBFC and look at their financials, look at their past track record, and give them a term loan or buy their securitized pool. That is the best way to grow fast, and the transmission will be faster, lending decision will be faster, and it will help. Any loss in transmission, any process, it is a loss. It is only bureaucratic. It will become highly bureaucratic and a loss to the industry.
So a good question on what's happening now, which is mutual funds and the redemptions that are happening in the mutual funds. How do you think that will impact the industry in terms of getting funds from in the capital market? And also parallelly with what's happening with the TLTROs and the moratorium, how difficult is it now to continue to get liabilities?
If you look at the mutual fund industry, it is not the first time they have gone into redemption pressure in the past also. And definitely, I personally feel in this kind of a pressure scenario, the RBI should have given a refinancing window to a mutual fund industry to get through their liquidity challenge, or they should have made it available through bank. And since banking sector is not taking any decision today, they're a little shy of taking decision. I think refinancing window by RBI is the best option, and it is done in the past. And as far as banks not showing interest in a TLTRO, because most of the public sector bank are where the government is the majority owner or shareholder. So probably unless the government gives some kind of a comfort to the CEOs or the CMDs of the bank, that they are behind them and they can take a call and some kind of comfort is given, the banking sector will be shy. So I feel personally that government will definitely come out with some kind of a comfort. Like in the past, they gave partial guarantee. I think here also the government will come with some kind of a partial guarantee to the public sector bank. That will bring in some kind of a decision making or quicker disposal by the bank. And also, bank have high liquidity right now, and they have already parked it with the RBI. Around 7 lakh crore is parked with the RBI. So that instead of parking, they then themselves can lend. They need not even participate through TLTRO. So I think that this kind of, I think they are waiting for some kind of a comfort from the government. And once the government gives, I think banking sector will be very active in lending to NBFC. I'm very confident and positive that banking sector definitely want to support the non-bank finance companies, because that's the best way to deal with smaller ticket retail and maybe the remote area, rural area access. Banking as a lender directly will not be able to reach out to most of the sector or segment which NBFC have been lending till now.
I think on the lighter side, maybe the reverse repo needs to be made zero so that banks can't park anything with RBI.
That could be the best way.
And I think good inputs for both the regulator for RBI as well as government. I hope they take note of it and bring the required changes. Thank you so much. So I think we've got some very good suggestions from all the panelists, and we will try and incorporate these in a document and share it with the appropriate regulators and the. Okay, with this we come to the end of our discussion. I would like to thank all my distinguished panelists for providing their valuable inputs into the current situation of the NBFCs. We've seen that a lot of product segments are holding up, and the expectation is that if things start to normalize in the COVID situation and the lockdowns don't extend for too long, most of the asset classes would be able to bounce back sooner than later. However, we've also had good suggestions from all of the panelists on what can be done to ensure that there is no further stress that comes on the NBFCs, given that this is a segment that's now very important systemically and needs to be supported by all means possible. So thank you